Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my February wrap up. So as I'm kicking this off, we are a week into February. It's a Sunday today. I have finished 2 books this week. I've DNF'd 1 book and I've done something very exciting. It's to do with libraries, but I will tell you about what I've read this week first before I tell you my exciting library news, and you can see if you can guess what that is. Right, I'll start with the DNF before I forget to talk about it because I don't have a copy anymore because it's gone back to the library. So we'll put a picture up here. So it was called The End of the Wasp Season by Denise, Mina. So this is a book I was reading for my library book club. It is a crime novel set between like England and Scotland, and I didn't read very much of it. I read maybe like 30 odd pages. The book opens with this woman who's at home by herself and these boys break into her house. So it's this home invasion scene and she's killed, and the point I DNF'd it a couple of chapters later was the point where her body was being described. It's very violent, it's very like descriptive. And it just really wasn't for me. Funnily enough, we have read this book before for book club several years ago, and I'm pretty sure I DNF'd it then for the same reason. But my memory of that is that I don't think anyone else liked it, and or they also DNF'd it, but this time around they all finished it and quite liked it. So that was interesting. And basically when we had book club yesterday morning, they just told me all about the plot and what happened, so that was fine, but I'm not too sad about DNFing that one. But I have read 2 good books this week. The first is Birds of a Feather by Jacqueline Winspear. This is the second book in the Maisie Dobbs series. So I read the first book in the series, which is called Maisie Dobbs, a couple of years ago and really enjoyed it. So Maisie Dobbs is a private investigator. This series of books starts off in and around World War One, and I think the series goes up to World War Two, maybe a little bit after. This one is set in London in 1929, and Maisie is hired by this man, this rich man, to investigate the disappearance of his daughter who has gone missing. And so we follow Maisie and her like sidekick as they look into this disappearance. And I really enjoy this series of books. I mean, this is only the second one that I've read, but I find them a real comforting read. I really like the historical backdrop to them, and I think I find them really interesting. Like there was stuff in here that I learnt about, which is part of the sort of revelations as they unfold, which I sort of wasn't aware of before, and I just really enjoy it. I think the characters are well drawn. It's an interesting mystery, and just a really like kind of cozy read, even though there's some, you know, unpleasant stuff in there obviously, but yeah, just like a really comforting cozy read. So I'm looking forward to continuing on with the series. And then I read Water Shall Refuse Them by Lucie McKnight Hardy. So I have read from this author before. So I have read Dead Relatives by this author, which is a short story collection which I really enjoyed. So Water Shall Refuse Them is a novel, and I will say that this is a lot. I did enjoy it, but it was disturbing. It is about this family. So we're following a 16-year-old girl called Nif, short for Jennifer, who along with her mother and father and younger brother go to stay in this like cottage in Wales. It's set in the heatwave of 1976. So they go to live in this cottage in this small village in Wales for about a month to sort of get away from their day-to-day lives. We learn within the first couple of chapters that they are grieving the death of one of the children. So Nif's sister has sort of tragically died in this accident, and we sort of find out more about that as the book goes on. So the mother is like basically paralysed by grief. She's unable to function. Nif has to take a lot of the caring responsibilities on for her younger brother. And while they are away, Nif meets this young boy called Mali, who she sort of develops a bit of a relationship with. And Mali and his mother are seen as outsiders in this village, because the villagers believe that Mali and his mother's ancestors were somehow involved in witchcraft. So sort of witchcraft and that sort of thing is a theme throughout the book. And for Nif as well, we see how she's developed her own, this thing called the Creed, which she believes if she like follows these rules that she sort of come up with in her mind, she sort of is able to place some order on the world and sort of things that have happened. There is a lot of animal cruelty in the book. It was very difficult to read at times, and it's pretty constant throughout. And there is, yeah, as I say, some pretty disturbing stuff. It all like serves a purpose within the story, but it is a lot. So I did like it. It has that sort of feel, that sort of quiet, menacing feel where you know something's off, something's not right. It's fairly slow paced, but you know something probably terrible is just around the corner. It's that sort of book. So yeah, I did like it, but it is a lot, so be warned. Let me tell you very briefly about a couple of things I'm reading at the moment. I actually have 2 non-fiction on the go at the moment. Highly unusual for me. I very rarely read non-fiction. One of them is Portable Magic, A History of Books and Their Readers by Emma Smith. I'm reading this for the Read Good prompt for February, which is to read a book with a flame on the cover. This is a book I have seen in the library in the past and just never picked up. So I'm a couple of chapters into this, but I'll talk more once I've finished it. And then I'm also listening to an audiobook called Unorthodox by Deborah Feldman, which is a memoir, which I'm reading for my work book club. So again, I'll talk more about that once I've finished it, because I should finish both of them in February. Now, my exciting library news. You may know that I'm a member of 3 libraries. Well, this week I joined a 4th library and it was very, very exciting. So I'm already a member of my local library, obviously, and of Liverpool Library. I have a library at work as well. And then the one I've just joined Lancashire County Council Library, because I work in Lancashire. So it's quite easy for me to get there from work. So I've joined them. I called in one evening after work this week, got my library card, had a look round. Of course, I had already searched the online catalogue, so there's a couple of books that I had my eye on. One in particular, I was very excited that I could just go and pick up off the shelves. I'll show you quickly what I picked up. I'm not going to go into any detail about these books because this is not meant to be a whole video, but I feel like you will appreciate my excitement. So the one that I was most excited to get, I'm really keen to get to, is The Imposium by Olga Tokarczuk. This is a health resort horror story. So excited for this. Drive Your Plough was my favourite book that I read last year. I also got Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. Clean by Alia Trabucco Zeran. The Intoxicating Mr. Lavelle by Neil Blackmore. Brutes by Diz Tate, and briefly A Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. So those are all books that I am really keen to read. My local library doesn't have them. I think I might have been able to get a couple of them from Liverpool Library. But yeah, so excited for them. So you may be saying, but Jennifer, your goal for this year was to read from your shelves, and one of the reasons you didn't achieve that last year was because you joined a 3rd library. So how is this going to help that situation? Well, my answer to that would be, I think joining a library is never a bad thing. So there we go. I mean, my aim is still to read from my shelves, and what I've done, actually, I'll show you this, is, so the bottom shelf of this I'm keeping for library books. This shelf here is the books from my physical TBR that I'm keen to get to sort of soon. So there's a couple of books that I was intending to read by the end of 2024 that I never got to. There's some books here which I have been like looking at on my shelves for years, and I'm sick of looking at them, so I need to read them. And then I've got sort of a bit of a mix of different genres, some crime, some translated stuff, etc., that I'm hoping to get to soon. So I don't know, I might do it like read a library book, read a book that I own, and like take it in turns. Obviously some of that will depend on if anyone reserves any of the books that I've got out, but that's sort of my plan. And I mean, the good thing about being a member of more libraries, as you know, I only buy books if I can't get them from the library. So it might mean me buying fewer books if I can get more books from the library. I mean, realistically, I'll probably just buy different books if I can get other books from the library. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to stop buying books, I might, let's be honest. But anyway, it's a good thing to support libraries. So there we go. What am I going to read next? I think I'm probably going to read Patricia Wants to Cuddle next, because I'm really intrigued with this one. So yes, I will speak to you when I've read some more stuff. Okay, so it's now March and I haven't done any more updates for this video. I was ill for like half of February. I've still got the residual cough, so I may have to cut every so often to have a coughing fit. But so yeah, so I haven't done any more wrap-ups, but I have read quite a lot of stuff. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I've read 11 more books and I've DNF'd 6. So yeah, so while I wasn't well, there were several days when I didn't do any reading at all. But then once I started to feel a little bit better, I was still off sick from work. Then my reading like ramped up quite a lot as well. So I've done like a lot of reading, I would say. Right, we'll go through these from least favourite to most favourite. We'll start with the DNFs. The DNFs are in no particular order. First is Girl A by Abigail Dean. This is a book that's been on my shelves for several years. I didn't buy this. I won it in a competition or something, and it was quite a popular like crime thriller novel a few years ago. I DNF'd it because, well, I hadn't really knew what it was about. So it's about Girl A who grew up in this really abusive family, and I realised quite early on that it just wasn't a subject matter that I really wanted to read about. So I DNF'd that one. I also DNF'd Fake Dates and Mooncakes by Sher. So I believe this is a YA book. It's a queer romance following these two guys. I didn't read that much of it before deciding I just really wasn't in the mood for it. And I think as well, because it's YA, it does read a little bit understandably young. And it was just a bit too nice for what I was in the mood for. Kind of surprising DNF. This is These Violent Delights by Nemerever. This is a recent release. It's dark academia, it's queer. It's quite long. So it's set in 1970s in university in Pittsburgh, and it follows these two boys, young men, who are drawn together. Now the book opens with them meeting this other guy, and like, well, it's kind of off page, but I think doing something really terrible. And I was just like, I think this is a bit too dark for what I'm in the mood for at the moment. I mean, I wasn't in the mood for a lot of stuff, but anyway. The next DNF was non-fiction. This is Portable Magic, A History of Books and Their Readers by Emma Smith. Oh, still got a bookmark in. I only read up to page 64. And it was fine. So it kind of does what it says on the tin. It's about sort of like the history of books as objects. It wasn't terribly enticing, and the only reason I was reading it is because it's got flames on the cover. So I was reading it for the Read Good prompt for February, which is to read a book with flames or fire on the cover. I decided to DNF it once I realised that there is another book that I own that very much has flames on the cover that I'm much more interested in reading, which is Shot with Crimson by Nicola Upson. So I am going to read this instead. Even though February's finished, I am just going to do the prompt for February in March instead. Another DNF is one that I don't have a copy of because I was listening to it on audio, and that is Unorthodox by Deborah Feldman. So this is a memoir of Deborah's time growing up in a Hasidic Jewish community. So I listened to about a third of this, and then I wasn't well, didn't listen to it for several days. My library hold expired, and I wasn't sort of committed enough to try and pick up another copy. I could have got it on ebook from the library, but I'd sort of lost memento with it by that point. I was reading it for the workbook club, but I DNF'd it, and I've also DNF'd the book for next month's Workbook Club, so this is not going well. And that one was My Favourite Mistake by Marian Keyes. This is really long. This is like 600, or not quite, but almost 600 pages long. How much did I read? I probably read less than 100 pages. Now, I did used to read quite a lot of Marian Keyes. I quite enjoyed her work. This is one of her books in the series featuring the Walsh family, and this one centres on Anna Walsh. The first book centering Anna was called Anybody Out There, and I think that was the first Marian Keyes I read many years ago, and I really, really liked it. And this one, so it's about Anna, who is moved from, she's got like a beauty PR job in New York, and then she ends up moving to this small Irish town to help with this, setting up this luxury coastal retreat. Anyway, the reason I DNF'd it was because it was the most boring thing I've ever read ever. It's so boring. So many characters, but just so boring. And like, I was really expecting to be able to persevere with this one because I thought, it's Marian Keyes, it'll be a fun time. So surely I can get through this for book club, which is not till like the end of March. But it was just so boring. I just have far better things to do with my time than read this book. So those are the DNFs. But I have read some good stuff. So as I said, we'll go from least favourite to most favourite. So the first one is Clean by Alia, Trabucco, Zeran, translated from Spanish by Sophie Hughes. So this I was a little bit underwhelmed by. My main issue with this is on the jacket, it describes itself as being one of the most daring and compelling literary thrillers in international literature, and I did not consider this to be a thriller. I didn't find it thrilling. I think if I had gone into it not expecting a thriller, I potentially would have liked it a lot more, but it's not a thriller. What it is fine. Like, it's a fine book, but it really was not what I was expecting. So this is told from the perspective of Estella, who works as a nanny to this really wealthy family, and she is telling us her story of how she goes to work for the family, what it's like working for them. There's a lot around like class and prejudice, and we know from the start that the little girl of the family has died. So I do think that it explores some interesting themes, but it's not a thriller. So if you're going to read it, I would go into it not expecting a thriller. Next up is Botchan by Natsume Soseki. This is translated from Japanese by J. Cohn. This is a Japanese classic. It was first published in the early 20th century. 1906. And I thought this was okay. It didn't really do a lot for me, but it was quite an interesting read. So this is about this boy. What's his name? I don't know. His nickname is Botchan, and it's his life, him growing up. He becomes a teacher. It's quite a fairly quiet book, quite slow paced. The final section went a little bit just off the rails for me, and I lost interest in it. But it was quite a nice read. It's not something I would revisit. It was interesting to read a Japanese classic. I will say it felt quite timeless. Like, if you told me this was written in like the 80s or 90s, I would have believed you probably. It gets compared to Huckleberry Finn, which I've not read, so I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but also The Catcher in the Rye, and I don't think this is anything like The Catcher in the Rye, so don't let that put you off. But that was okay, not something I would reread. Next is These Names Make Clues by E.C.R. Lorac, which is a pen name for Edith Caroline Rivet. Lorac is a anagram of Carol. So this one I liked, but my enjoyment was limited because I just got quite confused. So this is set at a fancy dress party, and the guests have all come dressed as famous literary characters. So on this evening, the person who is dressed as Samuel Pepys is found dead in bizarre circumstances. So my issue with this is there was kind of quite a lot of characters to follow. I struggle with like more than 4 characters. But not only that, each character had like 2 names because they had their real name, and then they had their name of the character they were dressed up as. So I did get quite confused. Although I thought it was a fine read. Next is a book that I read for my library book club, and I have read this, and I've read this a week early. What is going on? And this is Red Dust Road by Jackie K. I really enjoyed this. I was looking forward to this. This is Jackie K's memoir, and it talks about how she was adopted and her sort of quest to find her biological parents. It's not told chronologically, which I think quite works and kept it interesting. The book opens up with her meeting her biological father for the first time, and so she goes from Scotland to Nigeria to meet him, and he spends like 2 hours praying over her to sort of absolve her from her sin in being born, I guess, like outside of marriage. It's quite a funny book in parts. I really like Jackie K's writing. Jackie K is mixed race, and so she talks about feeling like I think the light just came on, feeling like she, like as a child, how at times she didn't quite fit in amongst like the community in Glasgow, but then when she goes to Nigeria, they see her as white. So it looks at aspects of race and family. Jackie K's adopted parents are like very supportive. Her mother sounds really, really funny. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good read. I do have a copy of Trumpet, which is a novel by Jackie K, on my TBR shelf here, so I'm looking forward to getting to that one. Next is Breasts and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami. This is translated from Japanese by Sam Bess and David Boyd. So overall I did enjoy this. However, to me it felt like it was a little bit too long, and it sort of, to me, lost its way a little bit. I would have liked it to have been a little bit tighter. However, that's just like a personal preference, I guess. What's it about? So this is about a woman called, what is her name? Natsume. So when it opens up, she's 30 years old, and her older sister, Mieko, is coming to stay with her, along with her niece, Midoriko, who is 12 years old. So Mieko, who's the older sister, comes to stay with her. She works at like a hostess in a bar, and she is obsessed with wanting a breast enhancement surgery. And Midoriko, who's the niece, she has like developed this sort of selective mutism where she doesn't speak to her mother, and she hasn't spoken to her mother for like, I think it's like 18 months at the point the book opens. She does speak to her classmates at school and other people, but not to her mother or in front of her mother. And so she communicates by writing notes to people, and she also keeps a journal, and we do get some journal extracts from her. And those are interesting. Those focus on sort of how she is grappling with coming to terms with like puberty and like being a young woman and those sorts of things. So overall the book explores really interesting themes around womanhood, motherhood, female bodies. I thought it was really, really interesting. And then the second part of the book, we jump forward 8 years, and we're following Natsuko again, where she is sort of trying to make some important decisions to do with her life. And yeah, I won't go into any more detail because I don't want to give any spoilers. But I did think the book looked at those themes in really interesting ways and in certain ways that I'd not read from before. As I say, I do feel like it felt like there was one too many things going on in terms of sort of the tangential plots, and I wasn't super keen on the ending. That's maybe just says more about me as a person than anything else, but I would be interested to read more from the author. Next is The Centre by Ayesha Manazir Siddiqi. This is a thriller which I was really keen to read and I did really enjoy. So our main character, whose name is Anissa, she works as a translator for Bollywood films, and she encounters this man, I think she maybe is dating him or something, who seems to have this incredible ability to learn a language like super quickly. And it transpires that he has been to this place called the Centre, where they will teach you a language of your choice in like 2 weeks. This is a very like secretive place, and it's not well known about. You can only get an invite there by invitation. Like you need to like have a special nod to be invited there. And our main character Anissa ends up enrolling at the centre. She gets introduced by this guy there, and then she finds out more when she goes about what's going on. She really wants to work in what she considers to be like proper translation, like literary translation. She wants to learn, I think it's German. I did think this was a really fun thriller, and I think it looked at interesting questions around like cultural appropriation, and yeah, it has aspects of not full on horror, but sort of like unsettling stuff that's going on. I quite enjoyed it. I did think again that there was just like maybe one too many things going on. Maybe this is just speaking to my personal taste because I think I'm saying it a lot in this video. But yeah, I would have liked like maybe one less thing going on. But I did really enjoy it. I think, is this a debut? It might be a debut. I would definitely read more from the author. It is her debut. Next, and this is, I mean, we've still got like 5 books to talk about. But this one here is probably one that will stay with me the most out of all of these books, even though I gave some other books, as we'll see, a higher rating. But I did really like this. This is Paul by Daisy Lafarge. So this is about a young woman called Frances who is a graduate student, and she's been working on this research in sort of understanding this French medieval like a tapestry type thing. So she's been working on that, but then one summer she goes to stay and work at this small like farm in rural France somewhere. And the idea is that she'll go there, she'll like work there during the day, and you know they'll feed her and put her up in terms of her accommodation. So there she meets Paul, who owns this farm, and they get into this relationship. So Paul, she's like early 20s, Paul's in his 40s. Paul is clearly quite manipulative. He sort of exploits Frances's naiveties in a certain way, and yeah, so it's this sort of focus on this toxic relationship. I mean, toxic because of how toxic Paul is, and we go through the book and we start to see, you know, how awful he really is. I thought Frances was a really interesting character. She is someone who and she talks about this as she narrates the story, how she will sort of be whatever you want her to be, and she will sort of mould herself into what other people expect and want her to be. The book, it does look at some very difficult themes, so be aware of that. And the character of Paul is actually based on the artist Paul Gauguin. He was someone I didn't really know that much about, but he's a pretty horrible guy. So yeah, I thought this was a really interesting book, looking at some very difficult themes and really interesting characters. The setting was done very well. Yeah, I would recommend this. Being mindful of content warnings. But yeah, I thought this was really, really good. Okay, so these final 4 books are all 4 stars, so I really, really enjoyed all these books. First is Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. This is a lot of fun. So this is set on a television set where they are filming this show called The Catch. And it's similar to The Bachelor. So we've got this eligible man. He's not really eligible. This eligible man who is, and these female contestants who are all competing for his affections, and they want to be the one that he chooses at the end. So at the point the book opens up, we're down to the final 4 women and this man, and they are going to spend some time on this like island somewhere for the final like section of this TV show. So we're following these characters, and we're following as well a couple of the crew members who are working on producing the show. And yeah, they start to think that there might be something strange going on this island. It's a lot of fun. It's like sort of like a campy horror, but with depth to it as well in terms of what it's looking at. And we get these throughout. We get these excerpts of other like media, which is talking about how this woman had gone missing on this island years ago. And so as we go through, we see like what went on there and how that links up with what's going on today. I thought it was a lot of fun. I would highly recommend that one. Then just this morning, I finished reading Beast in the Shadows by Edogawa Rampo, which was translated from Japanese by someone called Ian Hughes. So this was first published in, I think it was 1928, and this is quite a a well-known Japanese mystery novel that I've been meaning to read for a while. The author, the real name was Taro Hirai, who is generally viewed as the greatest of all Japanese suspense and mystery authors. And his pseudonym here is a transliteration of Edgar Allan Poe, so it's meant to sound like Edgar Allan Poe, Edogawa Rampo. I mean, I'm not pronouncing it, I'm sure, the correct way that you would if you were Japanese. But yeah, so I thought that was fun. So yes, I really enjoyed this. It's only about 100 pages long, started it last night, finished it this morning. So we're following this married woman who thinks she is being stalked by this guy who she used to date many years ago, who then became a mystery writer. And so she thinks she is seeing like faces at the window and hearing noises in the attic and different things. So this other mystery writer becomes involved in helping her and trying to catch this other man. I really enjoyed this. It's quite is self-referential the word I want to use, so it like within it like talks about detective fiction and different types of crime novels and crime writers and different things like that. I enjoyed the mystery element of it. That there is a couple of things which are like dated in terms of way certain people have spoken about, but overall in terms of like a mystery novel, I think this is a really strong one. I really enjoyed it. It was very pacey, and I would definitely read more from the author. Just 2 more books left. Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. This was another really, really fun horror novel. I really like Rachel Harrison. I think this is the thing I've read from her, but I want to read all of her horror stuff. So in this one, we're following, what's her name? Vesper, who left home at 18. She grew up in this deeply religious community that she decided to leave, and since then she has really been exiled from her family. And then she ends up getting an invite to her cousin's wedding, so she goes back. She hasn't seen her family for a long time, so she goes back, and then stuff happens. I really enjoyed the way the book went. It was so much fun. I spent a lot of the time reading this book with like a big smile on my face because I was just having so much fun with it. But what Rachel Harrison does as well is, I think, her books, or at least the ones I've read so far, all have like an undercurrent of, like, they have depth to them in terms of what they're saying, but they are packaged up in a really fun way. So this one looks at aspects of faith and family and belonging, and yeah, it was just such a fun time. And then the final book, and probably the one that's my favourite that I read in February, is Woodworm by Leila Martinez, which is translated from Spanish by Sophie Hughes and Annie McDermott. This is a very strange, weird little horror novel. It's only, let's see, how long is it? It's only like 120 odd pages, and it's weird, it's unsettling, it's creepy. As you're reading it, you're not quite sure what's going on. So let me tell you what it's about. Looking at their past and secrets, and it's told in quite a sort of a confessional style. The house itself is creepy, there is weird stuff going on. It's so difficult to talk about this book because I don't know what I can say and what I can't, and it's very weird and strange and unsettling. I'd say if you like weird horror, it's not like gruesome or anything like that, but it's just it's weird. It's weird. But I really liked it. It's so difficult to talk about though, because it is so short as well, but I really enjoyed that. Anyway, those are all the books that I read and DNF'd in February. I'm still reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I haven't read anything for several weeks, but I've only got that much left, so I might read a chapter or two today. And I'm also still reading The Impusium by Olga Tokarczuk. I'm about halfway through. I've been reading other books at the same time as reading this, which is not my preferred way of reading ordinarily, but this is just very slow paced, and I'm struggling with it a little bit. The subtitle of this is a health resort horror story. Thus far we have not got much horror, so I'm hoping that ramps up a little bit in the second half, because I am finding this pretty slow going, but I do want to get through it. So those are what I'm reading at the moment. Let me know what you've been reading. Let me know if you've read any of those books and what you thought of them. I hope you are doing well, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.